Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rooted Reflections. My name is Janelle Johnson, and today we are talking about how I left my toxic workplace with no job to follow because I had gotten to that point where it was either I stay or I leave and just see where life takes me, essentially. My intention for this video is to share my experience to hopefully help someone else who's out there at the moment, possibly in a toxic workplace, and thinking that they are the problem, and not realizing that actually it's the workplace's systems, processes, unrealistic expectations that are actually the problem. You know, I would say that I am definitely a walking example to say that yes, it might take some time, but it's worth it once you get there. So almost 10 years ago, 9 years to be a little bit more specific, I started as an administrator for a company that was quite small at the time, but was clearly growing rapidly, you know, in hindsight. The person who was training me was actually a service lead. So she was handing over everything to me because she was just promoted. And even though she was a service lead, she was handing over to an administrator who was one step down to take on all of her duties. So obviously, looking back, that was like the red flag number one. But, you know, to me at the time, you know, being early mid-20s, it felt like, oh, this is really cool. You know, I'm learning so much. And she was an absolutely great teacher. She was kind of like one of the go-to people in the workplace. And she knew so much about the systems, so much about like little hacks to make sure that you don't slip into this crack, make sure you don't do this, make sure you do this, tick this box, do all of these things. So I ended up being someone who knew a lot more than I needed to know, essentially, at my position because of the person who was handing over to me. We became like pretty good work friends, I guess. And I always admired her because she was so quick. Like she would the things that other people would take, I don't know, 2-3 days to do, she'd do in an hour. Like she was so fast. So very quickly I picked up on her pace of getting things done because she ended up being my manager. But I was essentially running that service because she taught me everything she knew so that she didn't need to, you know, micromanage me or anything like that. And I was a really quick learner as well. I pretty much peaked in that role very, very quickly just because I was a fast learner and she was a quick teacher. And the problems that were coming at me, I quickly knew exactly what to do because it was a very good partnership that we had because she didn't have to manage me too much and I just got on with things, you know. So when a role came up for assistant service manager, she was like, oh my gosh, you should go for this. And she literally helped me to apply for the role. She helped me with my personal statement. She literally gave me everything I needed to know in order to absolutely smash it. Like, I've applied for the assistant manager role and I've got it. Okay. So I'm no longer being managed by the person I was originally managed by. I was then being managed by the other person, another woman who again was like, she was so quick, but she was a little bit more humble with it. Like you wouldn't know that she's that quick unless you work alongside her. But she was also like a go-to person. So my pace of learning didn't really slow down. It actually sped up because, you know, the person that was managing me in this now assistant manager role, she was being promoted to a senior service manager. And what was funny, now I look back, what was funny was that she was being promoted to to the senior service manager, but I was being recruited as an assistant service manager. So I don't know if you can do the math, but there's a gap in between because they're not backfilling. They didn't plan. on backfilling for her service manager position. So essentially, I was the assistant to the senior service manager, which essentially comes back to me being the service manager. I ended up excelling. She was able to trust me with a bunch of things. Again, I wasn't someone who really liked to be a burden. So I would just get on with things. I would be really good at problem solving. I would look up my notes. I will ask around before addressing my manager. So that was a really good indication, I guess, for her that I was managing things. I was fine. We would have check-ins, and the things that I would bring to check-ins, it would usually be like, oh, this happened, but I've sorted it. Oh, this happened, but I've sorted it. And then I'll be like, oh, I've got this one thing. And then she'll be like, is that it? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. You just do this, that's fine. I was literally running the services on my own with little management. So it's not that she wasn't there. When I had a real problem, she would be there, she would be helpful. Again, she was someone who I admired in that workplace as well, because she knew everything. She was able to just do so much in such a short space of time, and that was rewarded, to be able to do that. So I aspired to be just like her and my initial first manager. It was not too long after that I started to realize certain things. I'm complaining to her about certain things, and she would do her best to validate me. I really felt heard by her. But at the same time, she was in the same toxic system. And where I admired her work ethic, if anything, it was just reinforcing that this is what's expected. So let's do this. And where she would say, make sure you take your holidays, make sure you take your time in lieu, there was never time for that. There was never time for that. And when you would take time in lieu or would take, annual leave, it was expected that you would still be reachable. So essentially, you're on call. But again, that was what was expected. So I met those expectations essentially because I really wanted to meet the expectations. I didn't want to disappoint anyone. I didn't want to let anyone down, and I didn't want to make anybody look bad, especially because, like I said, my first manager was the one who pushed me, and I'm sure she put in a good word for me. And I didn't want to be the one to let everyone down and be a disappointment, essentially, to be someone who, just doesn't fulfill. And I would hear, because I was in those management meetings as well, from a very early point in that position, I would hear the way that they would speak about people who seemed less capable. And I just didn't want to be that person. So I went above and beyond. I was working at 110% every single day. But working at that pace for an extended period of time really takes its toll on, it would take its toll on anyone, but it really took its toll on me. And this is one of the things that I kind of believe in terms of when it comes to a toxic workplace, it doesn't necessarily start off obviously being toxic if you've grown with that company. So like I said, the company was a small company to start with, but they were growing very quickly. They had constant contracts coming in, and it was just expected that you continue to meet the demand. And they even had constant recruitment of administrators, it just didn't stop. Where that was good, because they were constantly trying to recruit people, it was actually a sign that things weren't very good. Because yes, the company was growing a lot, but because of their toxic traits, people who didn't start with the company saw very quickly that was not where they wanted to be. So there was one lady that I remember, one lady started with us, and I think it was lunchtime, literally. And she said, oh, I'm going to go to lunch. And we were like, okay, great. Have a good lunch. You've done so well today. She didn't come back. She didn't come back. She did not come back. And I couldn't even blame her, because I could see the problems, but I was too deep, essentially. Like, I was too invested in the company. And there was a part of me as well, which I think many people experience, that believed that I was the problem. I just wasn't good enough, you know? So I would continue to go above and beyond, push myself to the absolute maximum to meet those unrealistic expectations, so that I could, you know, feel that sense of accomplishment. But the fact is that that never came, you know, or when it did come, to be fair, when it did come, it was like a split second and then it was gone, because things were moving so quickly. You didn't even have time to be like, oh my gosh, thank goodness that project is over. No, like, quickly back on it. And the expectation was that you don't spend time forward planning. The expectation was that you spend time back planning, if that makes sense. Like, maybe not back planning. Maybe, I don't know where I'm coming up with these words, to be fair, but like, we spent a lot of time making plans in retrospect. And let me explain it, because we would have a meeting, let's say earlier this afternoon, and it would be decided that the change needed to happen last week. So because the change needed to happen last week, we need to now go back a week in our systems and update these things so that it looks like we started last week. Like, it was actually like that bad. Like, we'd be talking about it this afternoon for changes that should have happened a week ago. And it was expected that it would be done. You know, it would be done now, kind of thing. Like, there was no question about it. So I always find that quite interesting, because that became the norm. You know, that became the norm. There were expectations to be met. There was money to be made. And there was reputations to keep, which was a big thing as well. So I kind of just fell into keeping up that standard, keeping up the pace of the people that I admired, keeping up to the pace of the people that I admired, even though it was unrealistic. And I didn't know how they were doing it, but they seemed to be doing it fine. Like, no one was saying, actually, yeah, I'm struggling with this too. No, the people that I was talking to, like I said, were really high achievers. And because I was talking to those high achievers, or the people that don't have any boundaries, it felt like, well, if I say that I have boundaries, well, that means, you know, I'm doing something wrong. That means I'm the problem, you know, because everyone else seems to be fine. But the truth is, nobody else is fine. People would be doing the most and just not talking about it. So anyway, I plucked up the courage to talk about it to my manager the first time. And you're going to laugh, because the first time I said, you know, it was in a probationary review. And I said, so think of probation, it's 3 months, right? So within 3 months, I was like, oh, this is a lot, you know, X, Y, Z. So I said to her, you know, this is quite a lot. And there's things that are going undone, and I feel like I'm not doing enough, and all of these things. And she really reassured me. She said, you're prioritizing great. You're not going to get everything done. You know, don't worry about it. You're doing fine. Anyway, I decided I'm going to hand in my notice. And then she talked me out of it. You know, I didn't feel like she took my choice away at all. I just felt like, you know, she made it like, don't worry about it. Look, we're going to figure this out. We're going to put this here. We're going to move this around. We're going to get somebody else to do this. And I was like, okay, cool. That's fine. Okay. Except the things that she helped me to move around, because I was already working at 200%. And I know many of you will know this experience. Because I was already working at 200%, her taking away whatever she took away only like etched into that 200% by 10, maybe 20%. So I was still working at 180%. And it just wasn't, it still didn't work. So I spoke to her again and I said, look, I'm really serious. I'm going to have to hand in my notice because this is just too much and I can't keep up with the work. And again, it really felt like it was a me thing. And she never once validated the workload was unrealistic. She never once said, I understand that I'm working at a pace and, I'm unavailable. So just to go back a couple steps, I was, she was a great manager. But again, as I said earlier, I was in the position of the assistant service manager and she was the senior service manager. So there was things that were for the service manager that fell to me because there wasn't a service manager. Yeah. Okay, fine. So when I've brought this to her attention again, she hasn't said, actually there are a lot of things that you're doing that aren't within your job description. We should hire a service manager. It was really just like, don't worry about it. You're doing great. Like, keep going, Janelle. You're doing a great job. You're so amazing. It was literally like that. So I was like, oh, wow. Okay, maybe I am doing pretty well. And anyway, because I was so serious that time, they offered me a higher salary. So they offered me a pay rise. And she said that I could recruit or I could promote someone from the team to be my assistant to take on some of those other things that I'm struggling to find time to do. So that all happened. I managed to get a great assistant. She was wonderful. I still love her all now, and I realized very quickly that I was just becoming my manager to her, like giving her things to do, but expecting for them to be done in half the time, and it just didn't feel great. So although I recruited an assistant to help me with certain things, I was really reluctant to overwork her because I didn't want her to feel how I felt. So I still ended up taking on a lot of the roles, a lot of the duties and responsibilities because I was so conscious not to repeat that same pattern for my assistant, who she was great. She was amazing. And she would ask for more and I would give her more. And then, I just could see that there were certain things that were happening that was just red flags to me. And I just didn't want to be that person to her. So anyway, time's gone on. I'm working. I'm drinking like 5, maybe 6, sometimes even 8 coffees a day to keep up with my attention, because obviously every time I drank a coffee it was to wake me up. Every time I would start to feel a little bit of a lull, I would drink more coffee. So I just couldn't keep up because if you think of like coffee will obviously help you feel energized. Coffee brings you up, gives you energy, but the come down from drinking 5 coffees in the morning, is rapid. And I experienced that almost every day. Like I said, I was properly in survival mode. And if I'm constantly blocking my tiredness in the daytime, evening time, I will conk out so quickly, or anytime, I will conk out. Anytime there is to sleep, on the bus, my eyes will be closed. On the train, eyes closed. If I'm waiting for my friend, eyes closed. And I will be asleep. I will knock out so quickly. And in the nighttime, I would fall asleep, but I would wake up throughout the night. And I would be awake. And because I'm awake, and I know there's things to do tomorrow, and I'm thinking, well, if work is on my mind, then if I just do this one thing, it will stop me from thinking about it and I can get back to sleep. No. Whoever does that, don't do it. Working outside of your working hours is a massive red flag. Okay, for those who do not know, that is a massive red flag. It is not I do not advise working beyond your working hours. Essentially, you're working for free. And in my case, I was working for free at like 2, 3 in the morning. Because I was like, well, if I do it now, I won't have to do it when I get in the morning. That's one less thing to do. And I know that many of us have said that so many times. I've heard it over and over again. But it doesn't make a difference. It literally is like a drop in a very, very deep ocean. And that was constantly happening to me. My biggest red flag moment was when I bumped into an old work colleague who works in a different workplace with me. And we were sitting on the bus together because we were going in the same direction. And we were just catching up. You know, she was like, oh, what are you up to now? And I was telling her, you know, I'm the assistant service manager doing da 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 da. Really happy to say it on the surface. But deep down, I was like, I need to get out of here. Anyway, like I said, I was someone, because I'd had so many coffees, the coffee come down was rapid. So I remember sitting on the bus with this old colleague, and she was talking to me, and I was leaning on the window, and I could not keep my eyes open. Like, I was literally like, my head was, you know, like my head was all over the place. And I kept opening my eyes thinking, oh my gosh, I can't keep my eyes open. Like, it literally felt like it was impossible. Absolutely impossible. I felt so embarrassed. And she was like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm just so tired. I'm so tired. And it was impossible, like I said, to keep my eyes open. It was horrible. And I remember, like, that wasn't the only red flag, but that was the one that I paid attention to. Another red flag was not being able to spend time with my loved ones. Like, I would either be at work or at home sleeping. Like, that was everything. And then obviously I would be trying to spend time with friends, but that over time became less and less. You know, it was a red flag. Huge red flags that I ignored at the time, or not necessarily ignored, but didn't prioritize. Didn't use those red flags to my advantage. I decided that I needed to figure out a way to get to sleep so that I could meet the unrealistic demands of the workplace. Okay, so I went to the doctors. And as I was sitting in the doctor's, because I actually booked time off, and I said, I'm not doing anything. Whatever happens, they're going to have to deal with it. It's going to have to, whatever fire there is to put out, they're going to have to put it out themselves, you know? And I made it very clear to everyone, I'm on annual leave today. I won't be in. Please don't contact me. Put my out of office on, which was very rare. You know, I had reached my point where I was like, no, there needs to be some sort of system. I need to get out of this. So I used that time to go to the doctor's surgery. And sitting in the doctor's surgery, my phone kept ringing. So I'm sitting in the doctor's surgery, and I'm like, I can't answer the phone. Felt bad. I answered the phone, helped with whatever query it was, and I just burst into tears. Literally just sitting in the waiting room, burst into tears. I was so sad because I was like, how do I get out of this? Anyway, the doctor said to me, well, have you tried going to the gym in the morning? And I said, what? She said, have you tried going to the gym in the morning? Because then you have a chance to work off all your energy. And by the time you get to the nighttime, you'll be able to sleep. I said, I don't think that's the problem that I'm trying to explain to you. And then she said, okay, so how about all of these other suggestions? And I just wanted her to give me these sleeping tablets just so I can just sleep, wake up fresh, alert, not have to rely on the coffees. And she did me a huge favor that day. You know, she did me a huge favor. She did not give me sleeping tablets. She told me to look at my lifestyle. I had so many health concerns. I was constantly dehydrated. I never got to spend any time with my friends and the people that I cared about. Not to mention falling asleep everywhere and then not being able to sleep in the nighttime. Like, I was burnt out. I was cranky, which is just not me. My natural state is to be quite laughy, jokey, bubbly, and calm. And I was just always on edge, and I was burnt out. So I decided, okay, I need to leave. And I went through all of the stages of, but if I leave, what would the patients do? What will happen with this? What will happen with the staff members? Like, I've taken so much time to nurture them and help them grow and all of these things. Like, what's going to happen if I leave? I don't want to abandon them. I feel really bad. I feel really guilty. So it took me a really long time of just enduring the pain of pouring from an empty cup. It's either I stay here and kill myself, or I leave and just see what else could possibly happen, because actually this path, I can see where this is going. And that's the point that I hope that you watching this video, people that you might speak to, are able to avoid like the plague. It's not a nice point. So if you have ever felt that you are alone, if you have ever felt that you are absolutely burnt out, drained, but also at the same time trying to figure out if you are the problem and believing that you are the problem, you're just not doing well enough, you are letting people down, like, I just want you to know that it's not you. There are healthy workplaces out there that will listen to your concerns and actually do something to help you to manage the workload. So my thing is that even if, it was me and I just wasn't able to manage the workload, it didn't change the fact that I wasn't able to manage the workload. Like, to wrap this all up, I thought, what were my key takeaways that I would be able to pass on to you? Being someone who's probably going through something similar, or wanting to know what to avoid if you ever have to go or meet something, if you ever meet something similar. Sometimes people get promoted because they have potential. For me, one of my key takeaways is that I had a lot of potential, but I was never trained in leadership and management. That was just something that was expected of me. So I was expected to manage a team of 12 administrators, manage multiple services, which were also kind of managing, not directly, but kind of managing doctors, cardiologists, healthcare assistants, as well as the 12 administrators that would report directly to me. And I did not have actual training in leadership and management. I had lots of on-the-job experience, which today has really helped me. So I will say that. But actually, it came from a lot of pain. And I would never recommend that for anyone. If you're in an organization that wants to promote you, ask about training. What training is there for you to take on to develop your skills, or to develop the skills you already have? Because essentially, if you're coming from a non-managerial position, you're actually going to need to learn leadership and management skills before they even expect you really to be able to do those things. The next thing I want to share with you is to set boundaries early. I will never encourage anyone to work late because they've only just started and they need to make a good impression. No, don't do it. Don't do it. Set the precedent that you have employed me to work, for example, from 9 to 5. If I'm unable to meet the requirements of meet the expectation of what you need me to do in that time, then let's talk about it. But I don't want to encourage anyone to get into that cycle, and then the working overtime becomes the norm. I understand sometimes working overtime is actually like, it needs to be done. Okay, fine, because you've got deadlines to meet and those kind of things, but it should not be your norm. And if you do work overtime, you should get your time back in lieu, or you should be paid for it, and make sure you take your time back as soon as possible. Don't leave it till the end of the month, 2 months. Don't do that. As soon as you can take it, take it. But the last thing, and I could actually, give more and more things on this. So let me know in the comments if you have questions, if you have, if you want advice on what to do in your toxic workplace or whatever it might be. But the last thing, and the most important thing of all time, is never exchange your mental health for more money. So that was something that I recognized that I did. And the money was never going to be enough. Never. Never going to be enough. Don't ever exchange your mental health for more money. It will never work out for you. It will only do benefit to the company. The same company that will replace you in a day, a week maybe. The way that I ended up leaving that workplace to close this all off is I was such a people pleaser that I found it so hard to say no. So I ended up planning to hand in my notice over the Christmas holiday so that I could send it and it's done, kind of thing. So I wouldn't have to go to the office, hand in a letter or anything like that, which used to happen back in the day. I didn't have to do any of that. So I sent once, as soon as, I think it may be the day after we had shut down for the Christmas holiday, I already had my letter written. It was ready to go. But I was so scared of the reaction, scared of them asking me to stay and me saying yes and then feeling obligated, that I said, okay, I'm going to do it from a distance. So I handed in my notes from a distance. And it wasn't until after the Christmas holiday, so early Jan, that the director who I worked very closely with, one of the directors that I worked very closely with, replied and said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear this. It's such a surprise. It wasn't a surprise. And he said, let's talk about this when we get back in. So when I went in after the holidays, we had a meeting straight away. Both directors were there. And they said, oh, such a surprise, blah, blah, blah. I really don't want to see you go. We want to offer you X amount. We want to offer you X amount more money, to stay. And we've got this really big project that's coming up, and we would really need you to stay. The services that you run, they're really going to suffer if you leave now, that kind of stuff. So I said, can I think about it? And they said, yeah, of course you can think about it. Take as long as you need, but, maybe we could say maybe tomorrow by the end of the week. I was like, yeah, sure. I will definitely think about it and let you know what my final decision is. And I went home that night and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so bad. And somebody said to me, nope, you started it now. You're almost there. Push through. You're going to feel guilty, but that's normal. And I emailed them the next morning as soon as I got in. And I said, thank you for the offer, but I'm going to stick to my initial decision and I will be leaving in now 3 weeks time. And I felt like the heaviest weight was lifted off of my shoulder in that very moment. Once I sent that email, and I was like, yeah, I feel validated in saying my no and meaning no and sticking to my no. They tried again. They offered me more money again. By that time, I was already like, nope, not happening. So That was it. It was done. And I only essentially gave them 3 weeks because I handed in my notice over the Christmas holiday, which took away a week. And I didn't have any job to go to. I had a little bit of savings. I had come up with a plan to just temp for a while. Wherever I was going to temp, I didn't know yet. But it felt like the best decision I had ever made. And on top of that, I had a holiday that was already booked to Trinidad. And I felt so free knowing that once I'd left, my work that essentially would have been piling up over those 2 weeks that I would have been away was not mine. It felt like the ending that I needed to that chapter. It really felt like I needed that holiday a year ago. It has really set a foundation for how I manage my work ethic these days. But that's for another story, because I'm sure I've been talking for way too long. So, let me know your thoughts about this episode. Let me know if anything resonated with you. And thank you so much for listening. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts and feedback. Okay, take care. Bye.